It is the 20th of May, 1982, and night is falling over the freezing, wind-blasted waters of San Carlos Water. On board the assault ship HMS Fearless, anchored in the shelter of Falklands Sound, the Royal Marines of 40 Commando are making final preparations. The air inside the troop decks is thick with the smell of boot polish, gun oil, and damp wool. Men sit in quiet clusters, carefully checking their gear in the red tactical lighting. Outside, the Antarctic air bites through layered clothing, and the black, featureless hills of East Falkland loom in the dark like sleeping giants. 8,000 miles from home, these men are preparing to land on a bleak, hostile shore, facing an enemy superior in numbers, heavily dug in on high ground, and backed by a formidable air force. In their hands, the men hold a weapon that many in Whitehall had already consigned to the history books. It is long, heavy, and undeniably old-fashioned. The British Army had already chosen its replacement years earlier, deeming this massive steel and wood relic far too unwieldy for modern warfare. Yet, as the landing craft slap against the icy swell and the ramps drop into the dark surf, every soldier grips it tight. It is the L1A1 Self-Loading Rifle, known simply to every man who ever carried it as the SLR. For the next 7 weeks, across frozen peat bogs and craggy mountain peaks, this rifle will prove to be the ultimate arbiter of life and death, confirming its place as the definitive British infantry weapon of the 20th century. To understand why the SLR occupied such an extraordinary place in the British military psyche, one must look back to the desperate lessons learned during the Second World War. By 1945, the British War Office faced a glaring reality. The trusted bolt-action Lee Enfield, while an exceptionally fast and reliable rifle in trained hands, belonged to a bygone era. The battlefield had changed. Combat was no longer fought across miles of open trench line. It was rapid, violent, and took place at ranges well under 300 meters. Modern infantry needed fire volume and rapid target engagement, but the British Army possessed nothing to match the German Sturmgewehr 44 or the American M1 Garand. The immediate post-war response was brilliant, visionary, and ultimately doomed by international politics. British engineers developed the EM2, a revolutionary bullpup rifle chambered in an intermediate .280 caliber round. It was light, compact, exceptionally accurate, and offered controllable, fully automatic fire. In 1951, the British Minister of Defense officially adopted the EM2 as the Rifle No. 9 Mk1. It seemed Britain had leapfrogged the world in small arms technology. However, the newly formed North Atlantic Treaty Organization demanded standardization across all Allied armies. The United States, dominating the strategic debate, insisted on a heavy, full-power rifle cartridge, the 7.62 by 51mm NATO round. Washington made it abundantly clear that American forces would accept nothing less than a round capable of long-range penetration and stopping power equivalent to their older .3006 cartridge. The lightweight British .280 round was summarily rejected. With the stroke of a pen, the EM2 was dead, and Britain was forced to abandon its cutting-edge design to adopt a rifle built around the far more powerful, punishing cartridge. Faced with the necessity of selecting a standard rifle for the NATO era, the War Office turned across the English Channel to Belgium. The renowned arms manufacturer Fabrique Nationale, under the design leadership of Dieudonné Sèvres, had perfected the Fusil Automatique Léger, or FAL. Recognizing its robust engineering, Britain purchased the manufacturing rights, but set about radically modifying the Belgian blueprints to suit British manufacturing standards and military doctrine. The engineering task was handed to the Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield, alongside BSA in Birmingham and the Royal Ordnance Factory at Fazakerley. The primary challenge was converting metric blueprints into imperial measurements, down to the thousandth of an inch. Every single dimension was reworked, resulting in a weapon whose parts were not interchangeable with metric FALs used by European allies, but were entirely standardized across the British Empire and Commonwealth. The technical mechanism of the resulting L1A1 SLR was an exercise in mechanical reliability. Operating on a short-stroke gas piston system, the rifle utilized a portion of the high-pressure gas generated by the firing cartridge. As the bullet passed a small vent near the muzzle, expanding gas bled into a cylinder above the barrel, driving a steel piston rearward. This piston delivered a sharp, violent strike to the bolt carrier, driving it back, tilting the locking block out of engagement, extracting the spent cartridge casing, and tensioning the recoil spring inside the buttstock. The returning bolt stripped a fresh round from the magazine and locked it firmly into the chamber. The mechanical action was deliberately over-engineered to cope with extreme environmental conditions. Enfield's engineers added deep diagonal sand cuts along the length of the bolt carrier and receiver rails. These internal grooves provided space for dirt, mud, and sand to accumulate without jamming the sliding mechanism, allowing the action to literally scrape itself clean during operation. The gas regulator at the front of the rifle allowed the user to adjust the amount of gas driving the piston. If the rifle became fouled in combat, the soldier could turn the gas dial, forcing more pressure into the mechanism to cycle the action through thick grime. Physically, the SLR was an imposing piece of machinery. Unloaded, it weighed 4.3 kilograms, stretching to nearly 5 kilograms when fitted with a fully loaded 20-round steel magazine. It measured 114 centimeters from butt to muzzle, roughly the length of a golf club, making it a formidable piece of hardware to carry over long distances. The heavy barrel was fitted with a distinctive long flash hider, featuring internal rifling cuts designed to suppress muzzle flash and reduce barrel climb. Early production models featured traditional wooden furniture, with buttstocks, handguards, and pistol grips crafted from high-grade walnut. By the late 1960s, these were progressively replaced by Marinol, a synthetic glass-reinforced nylon that could withstand severe impacts and moisture without warping. The manufacturing process relied heavily on traditional machining from solid steel forgings. The upper receiver began as a heavy block of solid steel, painstakingly milled down on industrial lathes and milling machines to create a rigid, highly durable housing. While exact production numbers remain subject to official government tally variations, estimates indicate that over 1 million L1A1 rifles were produced across British, Australian, and Canadian arsenals between 1957 and 1988. When the SLR entered service, its physical weight was matched by its mechanical fire discipline. Unlike its Belgian ancestor, the British L1A1 was deliberately modified to fire in semi-automatic mode only. The selector lever was physically blocked from moving into a full auto detent. Military strategists realized that firing a full-power 7.62 NATO cartridge on automatic mode from a handheld rifle produced uncontrollable muzzle climb, sending subsequent bullets flying harmlessly into the sky and exhausting a 20-round magazine in less than 2 seconds. By restricting the weapon to rapid single shots, British soldiers were forced to aim every round, turning infantry platoons into highly disciplined marksmanship units. The operational deployment of the SLR reads like a catalog of late 20th century conflict. From the dense, humid jungles of Malaya and Borneo during the confrontation to the dusty wadis of Aden and the arid scrubland of the Persian Gulf, the rifle performed impeccably. In the torrential downpours of the Far East, where humidity rusted inferior steel within hours, the SLR's phosphate and enamel finish, combined with its adjustable gas system, ensured it rarely failed to fire. In Northern Ireland during the height of Operation Banner, the SLR became the ubiquitous symbol of the British military presence. On urban patrols through Belfast and Derry, soldiers carried the heavy rifle held across the chest at the quick-release port. the psychological impact of the weapon was immense. The deep, metallic clatter of the SLR's bolt being pulled back and released, a sound akin to a heavy steel door slamming shut in a stone corridor, was instantly recognizable. At close range, the heavy 7.62 NATO round would punch cleanly through brick walls, cinder blocks, and automotive bodywork, offering hiding combatants virtually no light cover. Yet it was in the desolate, freezing wilderness of the South Atlantic in 1982 that the SLR faced its ultimate test. The Falklands campaign was an infantryman's war, fought on foot over wet-logged peat bogs, jagged stone runs, and treacherous rock outcrops. Vehicles bogged down almost immediately, forcing soldiers to carry all their equipment, ammunition, and weapons across miles of freezing terrain. If you're finding this historical breakdown interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know to bring more of these deep dives to life. During the bloody battles for the heights surrounding Stanley, Mount Longdon, Two Sisters, Wireless Ridge, and Mount Tumbledown, the SLR proved its unmatched worth. Argentine forces were heavily equipped with the Belgian-made FAL, capable of fully automatic fire, as well as heavy machine guns and night vision equipment. However, the extreme cold and wet mud caused severe malfunctions in many automatic weapons. The British SLR, with its sand cuts, manual gas adjustments, and semi-automatic precision, kept working. In the Battle of Mount Longdon, fought in pitch darkness and sub-zero temperatures, British paratroopers engaged in ferocious hand-to-hand combat against well-entrenched Argentine regulars. The sheer stopping power of the 7.62 NATO round was decisive. A single hit from an SLR carried enough kinetic energy to knock a soldier down instantly, penetrating cold-weather military clothing and body armor that easily stopped smaller rounds. Veterans recalled that in the freezing night air, the heavy rifle functioned with absolute consistency, its mechanical clack, clack, clack reassuring soldiers as they pressed forward through heavy defensive artillery fire. When compared directly to its contemporary international rivals, the unique philosophy behind the British L1A1 becomes starkly apparent. The primary strategic comparison of the era was the American M16, which entered service during the Vietnam War, firing the much smaller 5.55 by 45 mm round. The M16 was infinitely lighter, weighing just 2.8 kilograms, and allowed an individual soldier to carry twice as much ammunition for the same physical weight burden. Furthermore, the M16 was capable of fully automatic fire. However, in terms of sheer mechanical ruggedness and long-range lethality, the SLR occupied an entirely different category. The American 5.55 round weighed roughly 3.5 grams and relied on velocity to inflict wound trauma, whereas the SLR's 7.62 bullet weighed nearly 9.5 grams, traveling at 838 meters per second. In open country, across deep valleys, or against reinforced positions, the SLR delivered devastating kinetic energy at ranges exceeding 600 meters, more than double the effective range of the early M16. Against European contemporaries, such as the West German Heckler & Koch G3, the British SLR held distinct ergonomic advantages. While both rifles fired the identical NATO cartridge, the G3 utilized a roller-delayed blowback system that resulted in a noticeably sharper recoil impulse and was notoriously difficult to cock with cold or wet hands. The SLR's traditional gas piston and large folding side cocking handle allowed a soldier to clear a chamber obstruction rapidly, even while wearing heavy winter mittens. Furthermore, the Australian and New Zealand forces who carried their own Imperial spec SLR variants in the jungles of South Vietnam favored the rifle over the early American M16 supplied to them. The British-designed SLR possessed the rare ability to chop cleanly through thick tropical canopy brush without deflecting the heavy projectile, ensuring that fire directed into dense foliage reached its intended target, a capability the lighter American bullet simply could not match. The historical impact of the L1A1 SLR extends far beyond its operational record. It marked the end of an era in military philosophy, the age of the true battle rifle. For nearly 3 decades, British defense doctrine was built around the concept that every individual rifleman should be a long-range marksman, capable of delivering lethal, calculated semi-automatic fire out to 600 meters. By the mid-1980s, however, military thinking had fundamentally shifted toward lighter, shorter weapons, firing smaller cartridges, leading to the introduction of the SA-80 bullpup system in 1985. Yet the transition was fraught with lingering nostalgic and practical resistance. The early iterations of the replacement rifle suffered from notorious reliability problems in dusty and cold environments, leading many veteran soldiers during the First Gulf War to openly long for the heavy, indestructible SLR they had turned in just a few years prior. Today, the psychological and material legacy of the SLR remains firmly intact. It represents the pinnacle of traditional British small arms manufacturing, a weapon forged from solid steel and dense polymer, built to withstand the worst environments on Earth without failure. Surviving examples of the L1A1 SLR are preserved in prominent public and private military collections around the world, including the comprehensive small arms archives at the Royal Armouries in Leeds and the Imperial War Museum in London, where visitors can still examine the massive, pristine steel receivers that defined British infantry power for 30 years. To look upon an L1A1 SLR today is to understand the vanished era of military engineering. It was a weapon defined by its contradictions, foreign by design, yet quintessentially British in execution, stripped of automatic fire, yet vastly more lethal for it, declared obsolete by bureaucrats, yet desperately relied upon by the men who had to fight. From the steaming jungles of Malaya to the freezing, rock-strewn ridges of the Falkland Islands, the SLR did everything that was asked of it and more. It carried the weight of an empire's sunset years and protected a nation's interests across every corner of the globe. It was heavy, it was uncompromising, and it was utterly relentless. The men who carried it across frozen peat bogs under enemy shellfire did not love it because it was light or comfortable. They trusted it because when the world dissolved into noise, cold, and violence, the last great British battle rifle never let them down.